Elsa was still frozen as her eyes remained locked on the plate of food in front of her. Her mind raced, trying to come up with a response to the Duke of Weselton's questions. But before she could respond, the Duke continued to berate her with questions and demands. "You've come all this way, now I demand you tell me why you are really here." He practically shouted across the table at his guests. It was as though the Duke's tantrum had snapped Elsa out of a trance. She sat up straight in her chair and responded to the Duke's look with a glare of her own. "As I've said, we are here as royal representatives of Arendelle," she stated with a small quiver in her voice. The Ice Queen cleared her throat and then spoke in a more collected tone. "Is it not normal for new queens to pay their respects to the lords and ladies that surround our kingdom as well as our neighbors?" Elsa looked over to Anna, whose eyes kept darting back and forth between the Duke and Elsa. Kristoff noticed her nervousness and he gently held Anna's hand to calm her. Elsa and Kristoff weren't the only people in the room that noticed Anna's nervous mannerisms, though. Elsa realized this when she looked back across the table at the Duke and noticed that his eyes were now locked on Anna. "Oh no," she thought, as she realized by the look on the Duke's face that they couldn't keep their charade up for long under these circumstances. "Yes," the Duke began as he responded to Elsa. "You did say that. But I wonder if there's not another, more sinister reason you are here." "Sinister?" Elsa questioned with disgust in her voice. "What reason would I have to—" she began to ask before being interrupted. "Actually, Queen Elsa," the Duke interjected, "I'd like to hear what your sister, Queen Anna, has to say about this." A grin spread across the Duke's face that practically spanned from ear to ear as he noticed the panicked look on the young queen's face. Anna looked to Kristoff and then back over to Elsa as though she was silently asking for help. "Don't look to her, look to me. You are here as a royal representative, are you not?" The Duke began to speak with more conviction in his tone with each word that passed his lips. "Should you not be able to speak with the so-called lords and ladies as your sorceress of a sister has so plainly lied about?" As soon as those words crossed the Duke's lips, the petrified look on Anna's face quickly shifted to a deadly scowl. "My sister," she began to say through her teeth, "your queen has nothing to hide." The Duke was clearly taken aback by Anna's response and the change in her demeanor. The younger Queen of Arendelle continued her testimony against the Duke's accusations. "The people in and around these lands loved our parents, and we just want to show them that we know and appreciate all of the support they have shown Arendelle over the years since their passing. After all, they were taken from us too soon, and everyone knows that." Anna locked eyes with the Duke, who now appeared to be the one who was panicking. "Queen Anna, I assure you I meant no disrespect," the Duke said in a noticeably softer tone than he'd been speaking in before. "But how can you expect anyone in these lands to trust someone like who?" Anna interrupted. "Like Elsa. Elsa has given everything to keep her people safe. She even gave up the first 13 years of her life, locked away in that castle because she was afraid of accidentally hurting someone else." Anna looked over to Elsa as she slowly started to relax back into her seat. "No, I think the people will accept Queen Elsa as who she is, and they will see her as someone who will protect and care for everyone that is lucky enough to cross her path." The two sisters smiled at one another but quickly looked back toward the Duke as they noticed one of his guards walk over to him and whisper in his ear. The Duke's eyes widened a bit before he cleared his throat to say, I'm sorry if my behavior tonight has seemed rude. I assure you that I did not mean to cause you trouble." The small man stood from his seat as he finished what he was saying. "Thank you all for joining me, and I do apologize, but there is another matter that needs my attendance. Have my men show you to your quarters when you have all been satisfied with your meal." The Duke quickly made his way to the dining hall entrance and walked out before anyone in the room could even think to ask him where he was heading. Hans cried out for help as he was dragged out of the road into a near pitch-black alleyway between the tavern and an abandoned building next door. His assailant loosened his grip for a second to reposition himself in front of Hans, but the prince saw the opportunity to push the attacker's hand off of him and take a large step back. "I don't know what you want from me, but I assure you that you have the wrong guy." Darkness covered the assailant, so Hans could only make out a silhouette as he stood there in silence. Hans spoke again. "I don't have anything of value on me, and I spent my last coin on a round of drinks for my new friends in there. So I'm telling you right now, you're wasting your time. New friends, you say? A familiar voice replied. Hans' eyes grew wider as he realized who had pulled him into the alleyway. Lars? He exclaimed. Hans' brother stepped a bit closer as he responded. It's a surprise to see you, little brother. I have to say, though, not as surprised as I was to see you sneaking off the Queen's ship. You're surprised? Hans asked as he let out a slight chuckle. I'm curious as to why you're in Weselton. I mean, after the cave, I didn't think I would see you again. Lars put his hand on Hans' shoulder. I could say the same thing. I thought for sure that working with the Duke would spell your end. I'm happy to see that I was wrong, though. Oh, brother, you don't know the half of it, Hans began to explain. A lot has happened since our fight. Over the next half hour or so, Hans told Lars about all that had happened to him during his time as a prisoner in Arendelle. Hold on. They have a snowman who came to life and can talk? Lars asked. Hans smiled at the thought of his tiny friend as he replied, Olaf? Yeah, he's great. It sounds like they've treated you well at the castle, Lars began. Better than your time as a prisoner back home, I'm sure. He looked up to the night sky as he let out a deep breath. Look, Hans, I'm sorry about leaving you back there. Don't, Hans interjected. You don't have to apologize. If I've learned anything from being in the company of the guards and the surprisingly friendly faces around Arendelle Castle, it's that the world outside of the Southern Isles is very different from what we know. I was sent here by a malicious king who was probably hoping I would fail, and you were sent to clean up after me. It was a burden that neither of us wanted, and one that I'm not carrying anymore. Lars was left speechless. Now I must say, brother, Hans said as he continued speaking, I was so caught up in seeing you that I completely forgot to ask. What are you doing here? In Weselton, I mean. Well, like you, I'm here to learn about the Duke's true intentions, answered Lars. I spent countless hours trying to figure out what he wanted from within the castle, and why he was so desperate to get his hands on it. And when I couldn't find anything on my own in Arendelle, I decided to make my way back to his dukedom. Lars looked toward the sky again and then back at Hans. It's getting late. Let's walk back to the Cobblestone Inn and I'll finish explaining on the way. Hans looked confused. How did he know about the cobblestone? He wondered. That's actually where I followed you from, Lars said as the two began walking back through the streets of Weselton. Lars continued to explain all that he had been doing since he arrived in Weselton as they walked back to the inn. Once they arrived outside of Hans' residence for the time being, Lars let his little brother know. I actually stayed here on my first night in town. It's funny, great minds must think alike, huh? Hans laughed. I've missed this, Lars. I have too, his brother replied. We should meet up again in the morning, and perhaps I can help you track down this ship captain you're looking for. Lars and Hans said their goodbyes to one another before parting ways and turning in for the night. Back at the Duke's manor, the two queens and Kristoff sat in Elsa's room discussing the interesting dinner they had just finished. Where do you think the Duke ran off to? Kristoff asked. Do you think he knows something? Anna worriedly asked Elsa. Elsa took a second to think before she responded. I don't know where he went, but there is no doubt that he knows we're up to something. It's just a matter of how much he knows. She stood from the wooden chair that she'd been sitting in and made her way over to the window. She stared out at the small, flickering lights that were scattered across the dukedom as she continued to think out loud. If the little weasel knew why we were here, he would have definitely done something about it by now. So if it wasn't for us, why did he rush away from dinner so quickly? I don't know, but we might need to rethink our plan and head back to Arendelle before it's too late, Anna responded as she walked over to her sister. We can go back to the castle, send a formal letter requesting answers from the Duke, and have the guards at our side ready to help us when we need them. No, Elsa responded calmly. We came here to find out what happened to Mom and Dad, and I can't leave without knowing. As long as the Duke doesn't know why we're here, I'll be able to keep us safe, I promise. Little did anyone in the room know that the Duke of Weselton had stationed guards in hidden walkways that lie within the walls of his estate, who could hear every word spoken in any room within the manor. If they hadn't been talking, one of the trio in Elsa's room might have been able to hear the sound of a guard making his way from their room to report what he had just discovered.